Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest today is musician, producer, co-founder of one of the coolest music production schools anywhere, and that's David Alexander. But first, let's talk about some big news that just happened, and that's Tunecore was sold. Now, if you're a musician, a band, or an artist that's selling your music online, you have one of two choices. Really, you have more than that, but there's two major choices, and that's either to go to CD Baby or go to Tunecore. And many people like Tunecore. They don't like CD Baby because CD Baby, in the beginning, was all about CDs. I think they get a bad rap, even though they'll still do CDs, they'll still help you sell them, and they'll still help you distribute them. For the most part, now they're also heavily into the digital world, as is Tunecore. Tunecore was always a digital music-only entity. Last year, Tunecore board of directors fired the founders of Tunecore, which from that point on, the service actually declined, and a lot of Tunecore users were fairly unhappy with what happened afterwards. And basically what happened is it costs more money for the same service right now. They have a publishing agreement which doesn't really spell out a lot of what's happening to your publishing, and usually you're locked in for a year on that, which, again, surprises a lot of people once they find that out. So as a result, there's some pushback on Tunecore. But that being said, they've been purchased by a French company called Believe Digital. Believe Digital is basically a Tunecore in Europe. They're in 29 countries already. Now, the beauty of this is when you put Tunecore and Believe Digital together, you have a huge aggregation entity. Now, they're actually responsible for 25 to 30% of all the iTunes uploads, which is an amazing amount. So they have a whole lot of juice right now on so many levels. Here's the good part for musicians. While Tunecore was very much do-it-yourself, DIY, and expected the user to do most of the work themselves after their songs were uploaded onto Tunecore, Believe Digital is more like a record label because what they have are things like a marketing department and a radio promo department, project management services. Now, you have to pay for all of these. They're not free. But nonetheless, they're available to you if you do want to have someone else do it and not do it yourself. So I think this is actually an exciting development. I think it's going to be better for musicians and artists and bands. However, it's yet to be seen actually what's going to happen. You never can tell. But at least initially, this looks like it's going to be a good thing. So Tunecore has been sold to Believe Digital, and look for some changes. Probably not right in the beginning, because these things take some time to work out, but I think over time you're going to see some changes, and I believe it'll be for the better. If you have any questions or comments, send them to questions@bobbyowinnercircle.com. Don't forget about my new coaching program, which is 101 Mixing Tricks, Big Studio Tricks for the Small Studio. Go to 101mixingtricks.com to learn more. Now, let's talk about something that, if you've not done it before, it seems like something that's really glamorous and something really unique, and that's life on a tour bus. And many of you out there have done this before. Many of you haven't and really wonder about it. And it's funny because for many musicians that have only played in clubs, for instance, and have never gone on tour, or have gone on tour but have only been in a van, the tour bus is this mansion on the hill to them. It's something that they always wanted to do. And I must say, it's one of those things where it's cool at first, but it gets old really fast. So first of all, let's explain exactly what a tour bus is. For the transportation industry, they call this a sleeper coach or sometimes an entertainment coach. So if you're going to rent a tour bus, that's what you should look for. That's the categories you should look for, a sleeper coach or entertainment coach. Usually they sleep anywhere between 8 to 12, and they're divided so there's a lounge in the front and another lounge in the rear of the bus. Now, this rear lounge is sometimes taken over by the artist, so this becomes almost like a private bedroom sometimes. But nonetheless, you'll find that it sleeps 8 to 12, not terribly comfortably because they're bunks and they're about the size of a coffin. So if you're claustrophobic, this is one of the things that will get to you really, really fast. That being said, usually they're very comfortable in terms of everything is nice leather couches and seating. You have direct TV. There's multiple TVs. And in some cases, there's even a TV in each bunk, which is kind of nice. There's lots of music and DVD players and things like that. There's internet, direct TV. There's even a small shower. So if you absolutely need a shower, you can get it, although the water tanks are usually limited, so you have to take short showers, which is getting to be the norm here in California anyway. That being said, life on the tour bus after the first few days becomes very unique. If you're touring with a bunch of people that have done it before, they lay down the law right away if you're brand new. And one of the major rules is you never leave anything in the hallway. So in other words, if you're going to sleep in your bunk, you don't leave your shoes in the passageway between the bunks, because what you'll find is the next morning your shoes will be nowhere to be found. They'll throw them out. So you learn that really quickly, that you have to be really careful about what you leave about. What you're expected to do is clean up after yourself. Everybody is expected to be really clean, and it's really needed because on a tour bus, and if you have 12 people and 13 with the driver, there's a lot of people in a confined space for a long period of time. So it makes people kind of crazy if you don't really clean up after yourself, or, if you have some crazy habits that get on other people's nerves. Because there's so many people, it's also sometimes difficult to read, for instance, and that's the way a lot of people like to spend their time. But if you have some people that are bouncing off the walls because they have so much energy, that's not really a good thing. Also, there are buses that are dedicated for smokers and for drinkers and for people that want to imbibe on drugs. So if you don't do any of that and suddenly you're thrown on a bus with other people that do, that could also make your life very, very miserable. So let's talk about how much it costs. And even musicians and artists that tour all the time really aren't aware of this. But a tour bus is anywhere between about $1,000 and $1,500 a day. And it depends how long the tour is, and depends on what you kind of need on the bus, because buses can be laid out so they're unique for each artist, for each user. And there's a certain amount of modifications that they could use, although there's some standard features for the most part. So you'll find that, let's just say $1,500 a day, that includes the driver, and that includes all of the gas. What it doesn't include are any parking bills, and it doesn't include any tolls. So your tour manager is usually paying those. That being said, you're also responsible for the driver. So if you happen to stay at a hotel, your driver gets also to sleep in a hotel. The driver, you can't have just any driver as well. Usually the driver comes with the bus, and they're part of the tour company, and the tour company is very, very careful about who they hire because there's transportation board rules about them. There's also a rule on how far that they can drive and for how long. It's a 10-hour day for the most part. They can't drive any more than 10 hours. Somewhere around 450 miles is when they go into golden time. So they get paid more if they have to drive more than that period. So that's why it's really important to actually figure out your tour itinerary so it's fairly tight, so you're not driving really, really long periods, because it'll wind up costing you a lot of money. The other thing is, once again, when you're on tour, you're also paying for hotel rooms. And a lot of people say, well, wait a second, if I can sleep on the bus, why should I pay for the hotel? Just try sleeping on a bus. And you might be able to do it once or twice. But boy, beyond that, and really every once in a while to do it, everybody has to, and they do it, but you don't sleep well. And everybody wants to be in a bed, even if it's in a foreign bed in a Hotel 6. It's still better than on the bus, generally speaking. Although, if you're really trying to save money, that's where you're going to stay most of the time. But anyway, that's life on the tour bus. It's not all that glamorous. It's not all that much fun. And one of the things I remember, and it's funny because everybody that's toured, when you talk about that, they all have the same reaction the first time this happens. You're out on tour for about a week and you're already starting to feel really tired. and you can't really sleep well, and you're starting to get a little irritated because everybody's starting to get on your nerves a little bit. It doesn't take all that long. And you pull your tour itinerary out and you look, and there's 3 more months or 6 more months. Or in the case of a really long, big tour, there's 1.5 years left. And you go, oh, I can't believe we're just starting this. Luckily, it goes fast, generally speaking. So, and you're so busy that you kind of forget about it. Nonetheless, that's life on the tour bus. Do you really want to do it? My guest today is David Alexander, and he's the co-founder of Icon Collective Production School in Burbank, California, which is one of the only music schools that teaches their students how to be musical entrepreneurs, which is very, very unique. David has a serious background as a touring keyboard player at the Gap Band, and he's scored a lot of video games like Quake 2 and 3 and James Bond Tomorrow Never Dies. So he knows the real music world very well, which you can't say for a lot of people that teach in music schools. I spoke with David at one of the studios at Icon Collective. David, thank you so much for being with me. I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, and finally.
Well, thank you for the privilege. You know, I've heard the show, and I've always enjoyed your guest. And, you know, it's funny because recently I called you, and you were on a list of people that are important in my life, and I told you that. And so to be able to spend time with you today is really cool.
Well, likewise. Let's go back before Icon Collective. You were a protege of Thomas Dolby, right?
I had the privilege of studying with him for about 6 weeks when I was part of my early training, my music production career. He was the first person that introduced me to the concept of digital audio. He showed me my first WAV file, a recording of a violin, and how you could cut it and move it around. And
what was the platform?
It was the first version of Pro Tools when it was only a stereo audio recording. I don't remember the name of it, but
Sound Tools.
Sound Tools,
yeah,
yes. And it took me a week to process what I was looking at and seeing at and the ramifications of that. But, you know, it was really good to study with him. He's always been a pioneer, and I think he carries a fingerprint in what I do today in terms of technology, educating people, giving them the potential of being creative with these tools. So I owe a lot to him, actually.
Well, tell me about your early production career. How did that all come about?
I came to LA because I wanted to be a touring keyboardist, and I studied officially, and I did go out on tour, and I realized that most of the people, musical directors, when they weren't on tour, they were producing records. Yeah. Meanwhile, I was hustling, trying to find another gig. And that inspired me to pursue production in some ways. I went to an engineering school, and when I graduated, I realized that I knew how to set up a microphone and run an SSL console and a tape machine, but I didn't understand arrangement. I didn't know how to program sounds. I didn't know how to actually produce a record. And I went back and sort of studied that on my own. Cubase was my platform at the time. Mm. And to make a long story short, I didn't have an avenue for my skills. So at the time, there was a game called Quake, which is a really big, popular online game. Trent Reznor had scored the music. Yeah. And the music and the action were disconnected to me. There was a lot of action, but the music was very ambient. So I thought, just as an exercise, let me score a piece of music to every level. And fortunately, at the time, you could stick a CD in the computer, and when you went to level 3, it would jump to level 3 on the game CD. So if you put your own CD in there, it would jump to level 3. Yeah. And the developers got a hold of it. They contacted me and said, hey, we heard your add-on pack. We're developing Quake 2. Would you like to be a part of it? And it was just so amazing to not have ever done anything before, and then all of a sudden it's like Halo contacting you today and saying, hey, would you like to score? So that's kind of how I got into production. And then I went back to my experience at the school and realized that there were a lot of students in there that wanted to self-produce their records. And even though they were learning on SSLs when they graduated, literally they weren't going to have an SSL in the room. Yeah. So the concept of educating students on how to use digital audio workstations, not only to be creative and produce the records, but also understand marketing, branding, how to overcome the creative blocks, all these things that come into play of being an independent artist was something that I saw kind of lacking in the educational field. And that's what spawned the idea for Christopher White, my partner, and I to collaborate on this concept.
You know, it's funny though, because, and you know this as well as anybody, I go around and I speak to students everywhere, schools all over the world, and none of them do what you're doing. They're teaching nuts and bolts the craft of recording audio and mixing audio.
Which is important.
It's important, but so few of them teach production. So few of them teach the arrangement elements, putting everything together.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not part of it. And I think some of it is the fact that they haven't quite figured out how to do it, and you guys have.
I think it's just a different looking at it from a different perspective. I believe their focus is to train technicians, engineers, people that are going to go out and seek a job.
Yeah.
I think our focus is to train artists, entrepreneurs, people that are going to be launching their own brands. So when you look at that educational model from both perspectives, you see a whole different platform on how to do that. Now it's becoming more commonplace. Obviously, 10 years ago, we saw the trend, but now almost any school that you go to is going to have some type of digital audio workstation education, but they're missing the artist component, what it means to be an artist and all the pieces of the puzzle needed to facilitate you to have a creative, successful lifestyle.
I talk up Icon Collective everywhere I go. I got to tell you, because it's so impressive the way you approach things. Being an artist, being a producer, being in the music business means you're an entrepreneur.
100%.
And you guys recognize that and have that as the centerpiece of what you're teaching. Everybody else has missed that, as far as I can tell. I haven't come across a school that is focused on that at all. And that's one of the core pieces of what you guys teach.
I think it comes from the top down. I mean, we had such a hard time with the licensing aspect of it with the state, because they want to see job placement. You know?
Right.
And so we had to explain to them, we're not creating a workforce, we're creating entrepreneurs that are creating their own jobs, you know. But I think that philosophy is gradually changing, and a lot of these kids, they want to be artists, they want to be creative, but everywhere in their life, when they mention that, people tell them, no, it's not possible.
Yeah.
And I think finally they're finding a place where they're hearing, yes, it is possible, and these are some of the tools and techniques and thought processes that you can use to actually do it.
I want to go back before Icon again to your musical upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So, were you always a fan of electronic music, or did you start in another genre and gravitate to electronic music?
I started in another genre. I actually started in church. My mom was a pianist, and that's where I was introduced to playing in church. So piano for me has been like the driving force for my desire to play music and experience music. When I started touring, I got connected with R&B artists, you know, like George Clinton and the Gap Band and that whole funk and R&B scene. But when I started doing the video game scores, they were requesting more like electronic production, and being introduced to Thomas Dolby sort of opened my eyes to these tools where you could create new sounds that no one has ever heard before and approach music from a brand new perspective. And for me, that's always been really exciting, and one of the things that keeps me really connected to electronically produced music. I think the human element is very important, and one of the things that we're doing here is connecting students with the idea of recording a real piano, using acoustic guitars, recording live drum sets within that platform. But there are so many kids now that instead of getting a guitar, they're getting a computer.
Yeah,
and instead of learning to play a melody, they're learning how to create a complete idea. And from that large vast of people doing that, whether they know what they're doing or not, emerges something new and something interesting. And that spawns the electronic music scene to gravitate towards that culture. And then pop culture above it looks down and says, well, there's something we haven't heard before. And they'll take some of those ingredients and sprinkle it into pop culture.
So much now.
And the evolution moves forward. So for me, it's sort of like a breeding ground for new ideas, because people are empowered with tools to do things in a way that have never been done before. And from that comes a lot of stuff that's not good, but also comes a lot of stuff that's great and interesting.
How did Icon Collective, the band, come about? How did that happen?
Oh, the Icon Underground project.
Icon Underground.
Well, it was with Christopher White and I. You know, he and I were both working in an engineering school and seeing sort of the disconnect that was happening there. But I think he was giving a tour, and I was in a room working on a groove, and he was like, "This is amazing. We should work together." And we started collaborating on music together, and that's how that started. And that was the beginning of our relationship, of obtaining a studio and then seeing how we were creating music and what other people wanted to do, and we're like, let's show people how to do this.
Boy, I am such a big fan of your music and that entity. I wish you'd do more of that.
I'm working on a new project now that I mentioned to you earlier, that I've kind of earned my time back now that the school is doing well. And I'm really excited. There's a new company called Subpack, and they have this, it's like a portable backpack that has a transducer that vibrates the bass frequencies directly into your back.
Yeah, yeah.
So what a great experience to get a group of people together, transmit music to them in headphones with a Subpack. And that's something that I'm really interested in pursuing this year, is creating a show where people can have a new experience with music.
You're hip to bass shakers, right?
Yeah, are those the ones that you put underneath the seat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those. Those are amazing.
Yeah, and we used them in the studio for quite a while, actually, with drummers who just couldn't get their kick loud enough. And you'd stick that, you're connected to their drum throne, and all of a sudden they felt like it was a lot louder than it actually was.
Right.
And bass players, too. It was
Right.
surprising. In the studio, it's amazing what a little bit of thump will do for you.
Yeah, it just connects you with the music, you
Yeah.
know. So.
Yeah, in a way you couldn't otherwise, that's for sure. Well, Icon Collective has grown immensely. How many years has it been now?
10 years. Actually,
long.
almost to the date. We started the school about 10 years ago.
It's a big step to start a school.
I mean, we didn't know much about what we were doing other than the initial idea, and we learned a lot along the way, and now we have a lot of amazing people that are helping to nurture and water that tree, and it's growing really well. We're most proud of our graduates because their success is our success, and I think one of the interesting things about how the collective has grown is that people here within the walls begin to share information. So the upperclassmen are sharing information with the new students, and by the time they become upperclassmen, they're more knowledgeable than the upperclassmen that shared information with them. And that was a dynamic that we hadn't planned or expected, but it's such a key ingredient to how knowledge is propagating here. I just find that dynamic really interesting, and now that we're launching an online component of the school, we're really looking at ways of nurturing that interaction. It's so vital. You know?
Yeah, that's for sure. That being said, you guys have, I don't want to say cornered the market, but you're one of the few schools that actually concentrates in this genre, right?
It's interesting about genres because we're actually attracting a lot of people that are interested in electronic dance music, but our focus has never been that genre. I just think we're one of the few places where people that are seeing that culture and that lifestyle, that they see this as a stepping stone to be able to do the same thing. I was just sitting in a class called Art of Flow today with my business partner, Christopher White, which he teaches. And the main focus there is don't do what you see other people doing. You do something that resonates with you. And I think the main principle there is, one is where you're pursuing an audience where you believe that you know what they want to hear and you make something because you want them to like it. And the other approach is, the one that we're taking is, create something that's going to attract people to your music.
Yeah.
So have the freedom and the courage to do the music that you want to make, put it out there and let the attraction happen. So, but yeah, we are recognized in a way for being sort of an electronic music school, and a lot of DJs, producers are having successful careers, but we also have amazing songwriters, people that are doing a lot of different genres that are doing well as well.
That's cool. I didn't realize that. I thought it was mostly electronic music. So that's even better.
Yeah. I mean, now that we're here with this tracking room with 25-foot ceilings and, we can indulge in acoustic instruments finally, we really want to have a fingerprint in where music is going in the next 10 years by empowering people to go back to the roots of playing an instrument and being human with the expression,
What you're referring to, obviously, is now the school has taken over the old Enterprise Studios in Burbank, which was an amazing facility and turned out so many hits in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
So many. It was the home of Dave Pensato, and everybody else escapes me right now. But
we're sitting in a room where right now System of a Down recorded all their vocals, and U2 did some of their mixes in this room, and it's just interesting to see it as a new generation with no consoles in here. Yeah. Just the desks and speakers for students to plug in their laptops and still be creative,
And that's the way it's going. I mean, for everybody. I talked to all the A-list mixers, and I'd say 95% of them are now in the box.
Wow.
And there's a few holdouts that have a digital console because they can't get away from faders, but I'm surprised at how few, and even those now do so much more in the box than they ever did.
Wow.
And, there was the whole thing at one point in time, it doesn't sound good. The I.O. doesn't sound good. Well, that's gone now. And then it was the plugins don't sound real, or they don't sound, and that's gone now. So it's surprising. It's a different world. I just had Al Schmidt on, talking to him, and the question came up, do you miss the old analog days? And he said, no, not at all. It's so much better now. I record everything at 192. Nobody can tell a difference when we A/B.
Wow.
So,
I think the magic there is also, the person behind the tools, because in their head, they have a perspective of what they want to create. So they use the tools in a way to enhance that vision.
yeah.
It still comes down to the individual, someone that has experience with analog and knows what it sounds like, and knows how to use those tools to convey emotion are going to use these digital tools to convey that same emotion in a similar fashion, But I think a hybrid of analog and digital is still the best combination for me. I still want to record vocals through a nice warm mic pre, and I want to use. I'm experimenting with sort of an analog mastering chain right now, just to give a little bit of a different color at the very end of the chain.
If there is one thing that, again, if we look at A-list mixers, that they do differ on is whether to do that or not, whether to come out into a analog mixer, whether to go through whatever, an outboard compressor, an EQ, whatever, and I think it's split 50-50, where some people say absolutely you got to have it, and others say I can get by without it.
Right.
So I think that's great. Actually, it's one of those things where it's whatever works for you.
Exactly. I completely agree. There's so many people that say, Pro Tools is the best way to produce, or Logic or Ableton. But in the end, you listen to a great song and no one ever says, that's the best analog, reel-to-reel, tape machine recorded song I've ever heard. They just say, I love the way that expresses emotion, or they don't,
Yeah.
And all that in the end becomes transparent,
It's the same thing with mixes, actually. A few years ago, I had a request to do something like 60 versions of a mix that the artist wanted to have on hand. Vocal up, vocal down, background up, everything was up and down. And I tried to express that, look, in 2 weeks, you're going to forget about all this stuff, and you won't care about that hi-hat. But, when you're in the moment, you kind of forget about that stuff, unfortunately.
It all comes down to the idea, like is the lyric and the chord progression, are they all synergistic to express something impactful,
Yeah.
And sometimes we can be a little bit heady about the mixing aspect and all the details and kind of lose the big picture of what is really trying to be expressed,
What is the state of electronic music right now?
I mean, it's in such a flux. Before, it was so divided by genres. Now I see a lot of different styles of music kind of cross-pollinating. Just sort of like when jazz and funk came together and you had fusion, I think that same revolution is happening now. People are getting tired of genres and listening to 1,000 songs that make you all feel the same way. I think it's going to come back to originality, people creating music that they have to listen to that song to feel that particular way. There's no other song that they can listen to.
Yeah.
But the scene is vibrant right now. There's a big electronic music culture happening in the States. I know of a lot of producers that are moving here from overseas because they want to be here in Los Angeles. So LA over the last 5 years has really become sort of like the center of electronic music globally. I don't know if they want to transition into film scoring or if they have other agendas, but there's a lot of artists that are moving here now that have been involved in the scene for many years. So it's an exciting time right now.
Even more so than Europe then.
Yeah.
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
But as far as performing, though, the hotbed is still places other than here. I guess Las Vegas is still big, and there's certain places in L.A., but...
Well, there's a couple of electronic nights that have been really strong for the last 10 years. One of them is Avalon. There's a Friday night called Control, where they used to open up a platform for young artists up-and-coming artists to express new styles of music, but now it's sort of becoming the place to go to hear electronic music. Those artists since then have become major players in the game. But that Friday night event for me has been sort of a tastemaker of finding talent and exposing them. So I enjoy going there every once in a while. I can't take it every weekend because I'm my head's in a different place. But I like going there and just seeing what that music does to an audience, how people are expressing themselves with the tools, and hearing new ideas, how people are using the tools to create new ideas. It's sort of a place where I go to be inspired from time to time.
Are the tools changing much?
Man, the tools have changed so much in the last 10 years. I think back to when I scored those original video games and how limited tools I had and what I had to do with that. I mean, recycle going into a sampler, and then you had to dump everything out. But now the kids are spoiled, like they have so much power in their laptops, But it's also exciting because you give that to a person that's really inspired to create something, and they can do something really impactful and powerful with it. So.
Is there a trend going back to like analog synthesizers that you see? Because like Dave Smith has come out with some fantastic instruments lately.
I know. Did you check out the new synths that at NAMM this year?
Yeah.
He had not the Prophet 12, but was it? I don't remember the name of it, but I just remember playing that synth and thinking it sounded really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's always going to be a place for analog synthesizers. There's something magical about touching an instrument and moving a dial in real time. That's why I still have a little fatty in my studio. That's why, I have a Juno 60, a Juno 106. It inspires me in a different way than grabbing a mouse. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. And those units have a life of their own. They change from day to day in their character and their tuning, and it's in the imperfection that we find the beauty of expression, and those instruments are imperfect.
But that's one of the problems that we have now in the digital age, where that imperfection is so less frequent. And the other thing is, we tend to edit it out when it's there.
Right.
And it's peer pressure to some degree, and this is what I think anyway.
Right.
And the other part is that we're so used to listening to perfect that it sounds really funny when we leave something in.
Yeah. I am on this project that I'm working right now. I'm trying to be very conscious of groove and ignoring the grid in many ways, and even playing with the idea of speeding up and slowing songs down from section to section, because that's so important.
Yeah.
When I look at some of my favorite artists like the Police, they would get to the chorus and the tempo would pick up just a little bit, but that was part of the excitement and the energy that you would feel from the song. And a lot of that gets lost now when people are just quantizing things to the grid. When I was studying to play keys, I did a study on groove, and I dropped a Jimi Hendrix tune into the DAW, and I think at Cubase at the time I could move markers so that the tempo would change with where I put the markers, and I was analyzing one bar of how they played a groove. And within that bar, in the first two beats, they were at 70 beats per minute. And then the next two beats, they were speeding up to like 79 beats per minute. But they were doing that cyclically.
Yeah.
From one bar to the next, speeding up and slowing down within 4 beats. And I had an epiphany. It's like, that's the humanity and the emotion of that song.
Yeah.
That's why I can hear other guitar players play that exact same song, hit all the right notes, have the right tone, but they're not nailing the soul of the song. And I think if a lot of people were more in tune to the push and pull of music, as opposed to quantizing things to a grid, I think they'd be really happy with the results.
Well, for quite a while, if I track a band and we're tracking to a click, which is most of the time anymore, I would make sure that there'd be certain sections that would speed up. Mm-hmm. Choruses, for instance, and would just feel better and feel more natural.
Right.
Because, when you get excited, you no matter how good you are, you do have that tendency to push a little bit, and that's when it's good. Exactly.
So yeah, I think that people being mindful of that and not being afraid to do things off the grid is really important.
But when you learn on the grid, and then kind of figure it out from there, I think.
Exactly.
What is the DAW platform of choice?
Well, here we teach two platforms. We're teaching Ableton and Logic, and we want students to have exposure to both of them equally. But we don't dictate which ones they should be creative on. We show them the tools, and then whatever they're inspired to use, that's what they gravitate towards. Ableton is interesting because they take a non-linear approach to production.
Yeah.
There's an ability to take ideas and throw them together and experiment with those ideas in real time in a non-linear way. So you can hear the results of your experimentation immediately, as opposed to Logic where you would have to move clips around and organize them in a linear fashion. It kind of slows that process down. But, people say, the timing of Ableton's a little bit off, or, the mixes don't come out sounding exactly the same. Logic has a better sound engine. But like we talked about earlier, in the end, it comes down to the idea.
Yeah, right.
If the idea is solid, people will overlook all that,
Have you been following the Pro Tools thing, going to the cloud and all?
No, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, with Pro Tools 12, they're going to the cloud. And it's basically, and also a subscription model.
Oh, right.
So I think it's $2.99 a year, or else you can buy a perpetual license for $8.99. And there's a lot of people that are upset, a lot of post people especially, because with so much going in the cloud, it makes it difficult for them to justify to their clients. About the Marvel standard, right? Mm. The Marvel standard meaning to protect your property, your intellectual property, you can't go in the cloud. You can't even be connected to the internet.
Interesting.
Which is very difficult, if you have to be in the cloud to make your workstation work.
That's interesting. I've had a love-hate relationship with Pro Tools, only because as a young producer, at the time when I began producing, I couldn't afford a $40,000 rig.
Yeah.
And so the entrance fee of being creative via their platform was always very prohibitive for me. And that's why I gravitated towards Cubase and other platforms that allowed you multiple tracks without any restrictions. And then they were very prohibitive about what hardware you could use. You only could use their hardware. And, when they finally saw that the industry was changing, they were forced to change their model. And I think that they've always, I don't know, I hate to say this because, this is public, but this is my opinion.
Yeah.
They've always looked at how they could make the most money as opposed to how they could empower people to be the most creative. And in that single point of view, even though I love Pro Tools, I use it for recording vocals and some of the best mixes I've done on Pro Tools, as a company mission, I feel like they've missed the mark a little bit.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, I think if they would focus on what's the best way to empower people to be creative, they would achieve maybe whatever financial success they're looking for in this day and age,
A lot of people are hoping that it gets spun, or that Pro Tools gets spun off from Avid, or someone comes in and buys it, whatever the case, but who knows if that'll happen. I think that's the only thing that's actually making money for them right now, as I understand it.
We'll see.
But, you could almost say the same thing for Logic, in a way, where it's such a infinitesimal part of Apple that you kind of hope that a workstation would have more corporate juice behind it, more emphasis. But I find it to be an amazing package for the money.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job. And I think their mission state, their purpose for Logic is to create a platform that forces people to purchase their laptops.
Yeah, right.
So what we're hoping for is a platform that empowers people to be more creative. So I think the intention behind what you do really dictates success, and a lot of people just choose the wrong intention.
Yeah.
But still, both really powerful tools. I like Logic. I think out of all the platforms, if I could only choose one, I would choose that because of their basic sound set and the tools that you can be creative with. And I think you can be really effective as a producer with Logic.
For music creation, it's terrific.
It's amazing.
Especially if it's only you putting something together. It's for the money, it's hard to beat.
It's so hard to beat.
Is there a list of gear that you recommend for people that attend school?
We require them to have their own laptop. I think it's important for us to know that once they finish the program, they can continue being creative and They don't have to come here and sit at a workstation. They can just be anywhere and be creative. But we require the laptop. We require, a controller, a MIDI keyboard controller, a set of headphones, Ableton and Logic. Above and beyond that, we introduce them to a lot of tools, but if it doesn't facilitate the way they want to be creative, we definitely don't require them to use it. But we recommend, like, Steve Duda, I don't know if you know Steve, his X4 Records company has created a lot of amazing tools for people to be creative in a very intuitive way. He just released a new plugin called Serum, which is a great wavetable synthesizer, which is very intuitive. He's got a plugin called Cthulhu that allows non-musical people to input chords or play chord progressions with single notes, which I think empowers people to be creative. He has a drum machine called, this sounds like an X for a commercial now, but he has a drum machine that's very intuitive for people to program. And we have a staff of about 15, 16 instructors, and they all have their own unique way of making music. So students get to see a little bit of a wide spectrum of how people approach the process of expressing an idea emotionally through producing a record, and they can kind of pick and choose what resonates with them,
Is there a certain way that students gravitate by the time when they start the program till the time they finish? Do you see a trend in graduates?
I do. I think I see graduates coming in having an idea that, they want to be successful, and they want people to like their music, but their approach to doing that is trying to imitate what other people are doing.
Yeah.
But by the time they graduate, I think they have the courage, the wisdom, and the faith to create what they feel resonates with them and not be scared to put that out, even if it's different from what everybody else is doing. And I think probably that's one of the things, other than the technical aspect, obviously, but one of the most important things that our graduates walk away with is courage, the courage to do the music that resonates with them, even though it doesn't sound like anybody else's. That's the big change that I see in our graduates,
When I visited you in the previous facility that you were in, also in Burbank, you had artists in residence that were visiting artists in residence. Do you still have that?
We do, and there's so many people that resonate with our philosophy that basically we really don't go out and pursue people and say, hey, would you like to come and speak at the school? We're sort of a magnet. People find out what we're doing and they believe what we believe, so they come to us and they say, hey, I want to know more about what you're doing. I'd like to talk to your students. I'd like to share some information. So all that is very, very organic. It's not really methodical or planned, or it's just very organic, I like that idea of, attracting people as opposed to pursuing people, and that's worked out really well for us,
Yeah, but didn't you have people that were in one of the studios for a while? And then
I think we've had advisors, when we were first starting, people that we would go to and say, what are some of the things that you're doing to be successful in your career? And then we would poll that information and see how we could incorporate some of that into our curriculum. But currently we don't have anyone that's in-house that regularly comes in and speaks, I think the curriculum is what stands strong as opposed to any individual person. And the curriculum is a culmination of everyone here at the collective. We just went from a 9-month program to a full year program. We deconstructed everything and said, is there a way to do this better? Is there a way to make this a continual conversation? Is there a way to structure the information so that the sequence with which they acquire the information makes the most sense? And it took us about 9 months to do that. So
you need approval from the state when you do that?
Yeah, we just went through a big process, and last month we received the approval for that, which, by the way, was almost like a 5-year process to go through that. So it's kind of a milestone for us for the state to say, move forward with your plans, and we're going to leave you alone.
I remember I was hired to put together a program for Nova Institute. They had an audio program for a couple of years anyway, down somewhere in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And they had a person on staff that his only job was to put together programs and follow them through with the state. And I was amazed at the paperwork. And this is in the 90s.
Oh, man.
the
codes,
reams of
yeah.
paperwork. It was amazing.
Everything. I mean, they've got codes and bylaws and rules and regulations about how you do everything, So we play within that structure, but they gave us the freedom to deliver the information that we wanted to deliver. And, some of those things made a lot of sense. They definitely helped us tighten up infrastructure, how registration is handled, how we keep our student records, just a lot of things about the day-to-day activities that helped us tighten that up through their codes. But it was really challenging to meet all their requirements and stay true to our mission statement.
I don't think people understand what it takes to be in business out of school for the most part. And
you see, I have no hair, right?
But it's funny because in every city there's a studio that's not doing real well, and they think, well, you know what? We'll open up a school and we'll get people in here that will teach. And maybe they can get away with it for a little bit, but they have no idea what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, that comes back to the intention, because they want to have students so they can pay for the building.
Yeah.
But if they wanted to have students because they wanted to empower them to be creative and help those people, I think they would have a different result. So it's challenging to run a school. But we've been blessed to be able to grow organically and to have a lot of people support us. And we have a great team on staff. I'm so proud of everyone in our staff, from admissions to registrar, director of education, the instructors. We're all very united in the mission of empowering our students to be creative. And I think that comes from the top down.
Sure. Where's it going from here?
From here, we want to keep the experience of Icon very Harvard in a way. So, we've been approached by other entities to open up sister locations, but we really want this to be sort of the place where the people that really want to express themselves musically to be able to come here. We're not allowing the program to grow in terms of numbers here. We're keeping that a very small group, 18 people per instructor. But our next move is to bring this education worldwide through the online program.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really excited to be able to empower people who can't physically come to LA to sort of share in the knowledge and the experience. That's what's next. And other than that is just our real desire to have a fingerprint on the music industry, the type of music that people are creating, and inspiring people to be original and left of center,
Well, you're certainly doing that, that's for sure. I think you've accomplished your mission nicely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, uniquely so, because I can't think of another school that has that approach.
Interesting. Well, we were blessed enough to see a gap in the education model, and we stepped in to fill it.
Last question. What is the biggest business lesson that you've learned or was taught by someone in your time in the music business?
The biggest lesson, there have been so many. I think one that resonates with me right now is just how much faith you need to have in what you're trying to accomplish. The idea that you have to believe in what you're doing first before anyone else believes it. A lot of times, we pursue an idea and we look for other people to validate it before we move forward. But life works just the opposite. You have to be the one to validate and believe in what you're doing, and then people will get behind you as if you're already at your goal. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons. And I actually learned that, interestingly enough, before I started the school, at a seminar that I was an audio field recording engineer for. So I had to listen to the presentation and make sure there was no glitches in the audio. But that's one guy said, you don't have to be at your destination. You just have to be walking towards it so strongly that people will get behind you as if you're already there. And I never forgot that. I have to believe in what I want to do before other people believe it. And I think that applies to anything that you're trying to do, whether it be creative or business or any other type of strategy. So that's the biggest lesson that I learned. From that lesson spawned everything that we've done to this point with Icon Collective.
It's very cool. When you learn lessons, you never know where they're going to come from.
That's right.
Or when they're going to come.
Right.
And hopefully they never stop coming.
They never stop coming. This quarter I'm sitting in Christopher's Art of Flow class because I want to be a student. I want to learn. We're always learning,
Yeah.
And that's what I love about music production. There's always some new way of expressing yourself, some new way of approaching a mix, some new of combining a chord progression, some new way of getting to the core of what you're trying to express. That never, ever goes away. As an artist, I feel like no song really defines you. It's more a snapshot of where you were in that moment in time, you know?
You know, that's so cool, though. It's never the same. And I think that's what really fuels us for the most part, because it does change so often. But opposed now to being a musician, I'd like to go on cruises. And I always, I like to talk to the musicians on board, but I look at them first and they all have that dead look in their eyes, like, oh my God, I got to do this again. I have to play these same songs one more time. And I can remember for playing in clubs, 7 nights a week and doing the same thing. It's like, that's soul crushing to a musician. You think it's cool, but it's soul crushing.
Yeah.
So when you're actually doing something that's creative,
Yes.
and it's changing all the time,
Yes.
it's vibrant, it's cool. It's,
I mean, I think everyone is creative. I don't think every decision that you make is creative. Everyone has the ability to be creative. I just don't think a lot of people know how to exercise their creativity. And for me, I'm most alive and vibrant when I'm creating.
Yeah.
When I'm not creating, I feel like I'm lacking a bit of purpose, And when you create to express an idea or something that's going to empower other people, I think that's when it's the best,
Yeah. Well, last question, and this is really the last one. What do you do with students that just don't get it? There's always one, at least.
Yeah, 100%. We've set our standards pretty high, and the first thing that we tell the students when they come here is, your participation in the program is key. We're going to set the bar really high. If you're not able to achieve it, we're going to help you achieve it. But if you don't put in the work, you're not going to complete the program. A lot of people have come before you, have done the work, and they're doing really well. And by you graduating, you're absorbing their reputation. Mm. So if we allow you to just, excuse the term, but half-ass your way through the program, and we allow you to graduate, you're going to go out there and you're not going to do well, and you're going to blame us, and you're going to damage the reputation not only of the school, but the people that came before you. And they've worked too hard in order for us to allow you to do that. So we do everything in our power to make sure that they're moving forward within the program. So the only time they don't succeed is because they don't succeed.
Yeah. That's awesome. Again, a different approach from everybody else. That's what's so cool about you guys. I'm so happy that you've been successful and hope you have continued success, and I know you will.
Thank you. I mean, with people, in our circle of friends like yourself that are supporting us, and we're just really blessed. That's all I can really say,
Very cool. Thanks for being with me, David.
Good to see you, brother.
To find out more about David and Icon Collective, go to iconcollective.com or learntoproduce.com. Learn to Produce is learn, the number 2, produce, all one word. Learntoproduce.com, or Icon Collective is Icon, I-C-O-N, and then Collective, C-O-L-L-E-C-T-I-V-E, all one word, iconcollective.com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please send them to questions@bobbyoinnercircle.com. Many thanks to Steve Cherubino, who's the host of the EDM Producer Podcast at edmmr.com, and Steve helps put this show together. Thank you kindly, Steve. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to bobbyowsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to bobbyowinnercircle.com, or you can find it on iTunes or Stitcher. At bobbyowsinski.com and bobbyowinnercircle.com, you'll find a sign-up form for my newsletter for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I'll see you next time.